The colony of Valora 9 had always been a quiet frontier world. Families built farms on its fertile plains, mining rigs cut deep into its iron-rich mountains, and orbital stations flickered above the atmosphere like silver guardians. That illusion of safety shattered in a single night. The first warning came when the stars themselves seemed to vanish. Shadows spread across the horizon as colossal shapes descended from space. Not meteor storms, not pirates. These were living war machines, ships grown, not built, covered in jagged spines that pulsed like the ribs of a beast. They blotted out the sky with their sheer mass. Alarms screamed across the colony. Civilians stampeded toward underground shelters while soldiers scrambled to defense lines. Captain Daniel Reeves, hardened from years of guerrilla fighting on border worlds, sprinted through the chaos with his unit. Dust streaked his armor, his rifle hot from constant bursts of fire. The enemy struck with merciless precision. Drone swarms poured from the hive ships like locusts, their wings buzzing with an eerie metallic whine. They weren't mechanical. They were alive, hybrid abominations of flesh and steel. Razor limbs slashed at barricades while acid spit melted through tanks and armor. The smell of burning metal mixed with human screams. Reeves barked into his comms, voice raw. "Fall back to the market sector. Clear a path for civilians." His soldiers obeyed without hesitation, firing suppressive bursts as families fled behind them. Every corner became a battlefield. A grocery stand exploded as drones tore through it. A child tripped in the debris. Reeves dove, grabbed the boy, and shoved him toward safety before unloading his rifle into the swarm advancing on them. Above, the human fleet tried to hold orbit. Admiral Vargas's voice crackled across comms. "All ships form defensive wall." "Do not repeat, do not let them break through atmosphere." But Reeves could see the truth. Plasma beams ripped through frigates like paper. Carriers split apart, spilling fire into the upper atmosphere. The enemy wasn't fighting for control. They were burning everything. The ground shook as a hive pod crashed into the colony square, unfolding like a monstrous flower. Drones screeched as they poured out. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Reeves's unit fired until their rifles overheated, switching to grenades and blades when the tide overwhelmed them. Corporal Lane screamed as she was dragged down. Reeves slashed with his combat knife, killing 2 drones before pulling her back. But she was bleeding badly, her armor corroded by acid. He shoved a med patch onto her wound, eyes hard. "We're not dying here," he growled. They pushed through rubble and flame, regrouping in the shadow of a collapsed tower. The night sky blazed crimson from orbital bombardments. The air was thick with ash. Reeves wiped sweat from his brow and scanned the heavens. For one brief moment, he wondered if this was humanity's last stand. Another colony erased, another name forgotten. Then the sky changed again. Through the clouds of fire and smoke, a new vessel descended. Sleek and silver, it glowed with lines of blue energy that shimmered like rivers of light. Unlike the hive ships, it was clean, elegant, designed not for horror but for power and precision. It moved silently, unnervingly calm amid chaos. The drones shrieked, distracted, and turned their attention toward the intruder. The silver ship's belly opened, releasing a soft hum that vibrated through the ground. From the bay, figures leapt down. Reeves froze. They were tall, easily 7 feet each, armored in curved silver plates that hugged their forms like liquid steel. Their movements were impossibly fast, controlled, as if each step was rehearsed 1,000 times. Their helmets retracted with a hiss, revealing faces sharp and fierce, eyes glowing like embers. Not men. All women. They struck the drones with blinding efficiency. Energy blades cut through chitin and steel alike, each swing felling multiple enemies. Their formation was flawless, flowing like one body. Within minutes, the swarm that had pinned Reeves's squad was nothing but burning husks. The colony survivors stared, awe mixing with fear. Who were they? Not human, not insectoid, but something new entirely. Reeves raised his weapon, instinct telling him not to trust anything in this war zone. The tallest of the women locked eyes with him. Her golden irises glowed faintly, her expression unreadable. She tilted her head, almost studying him. Then she spoke in a language he didn't understand, harsh, fast syllables that sounded like steel clashing. Her companions circled Reeves, their blades still dripping with drone ichor. Before he could react, one reached forward and tore at his combat vest, ripping it away like fragile paper. Another pulled at his sleeves, exposing his skin. Their gazes sharpened, and for a moment, Reeves thought they might kill him on the spot. Instead, they looked. Astonished, one whispered something to the leader. Another touched his arm, frowning as if trying to understand. Reeves felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Then the leader spoke a single word in broken English. "Male." The others repeated it, their voices echoing with shock and curiosity. Reeves's heart pounded. He realized with startling clarity that these warrior women had never seen a man before. Not just a human male, any male. The battlefield burned around them, but in that moment, the real war was no longer just survival. It was the clash of two species, two truths, colliding in fire, and Reeves had no idea if he had just been saved or claimed. The warrior women moved like predators closing in on prey. Reeves didn't resist when their leader snapped an order, and two of them grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back with terrifying ease. Their grip was strong enough to bruise through armor, their movements precise, almost mechanical. He had been captured before, pirates, raiders, enemy factions, but never like this. This wasn't humiliation or torture. This was examination. They marched him toward their ship, dragging him through firelit streets littered with broken drones. The civilians he had fought to save stared with wide eyes, unsure whether Reeves was being rescued or abducted. One of his squad mates tried to lunge forward to help him, but a single glance from the alien warriors froze everyone in place. The silent promise was clear: interfere and you die. The silver vessel loomed above the ruins, its hull alive with shimmering veins of blue light. The ramp hissed open, releasing a gust of sterile, cold air. Reeves was hauled inside, and the doors sealed shut with a boom that drowned out the distant cries of his people. The interior was unlike any human craft. Smooth walls curved like the inside of a living shell. Symbols pulsed across surfaces like glowing veins, shifting in patterns Reeves couldn't decipher. The air smelled faintly of ozone and metal, sharp and sterile. They shoved him into a chamber lined with weapons racks and banners that shimmered like liquid silver. He stumbled, catching himself on the floor, before looking up to find a circle of armored giants surrounding him. Their blades remained drawn, gleaming in the pale light. Reeves slowly rose, chest heaving, eyes locked on the leader. She towered above the others, braid coiled over one shoulder like a whip, her armor etched with intricate lines that told stories of rank and victories. She stepped forward, her gaze never leaving him. Then came the tearing. One warrior knelt, her hand seizing his jacket with impossible strength. The fabric gave way with a ripping snarl, exposing the sweat-drenched shirt beneath. Another tugged at that layer until it shredded down the center, revealing skin scarred by years of combat. The room grew silent, dozens of golden and violet eyes fixed on him, studying every mark, every line of muscle, every imperfection. They murmured to one another in sharp, metallic syllables, their voices carrying notes of both awe and confusion. Some touched their own armor, as if comparing what they saw with themselves. Others reached toward him, fingertips brushing against his skin as though testing if it were real. Reeves jerked back, anger flaring. "Get your hands off me!" The leader didn't flinch. Instead, she crouched so that her gaze met his directly. Her eyes narrowed as though peering past flesh into his very core. With deliberate slowness, she pressed a hand to his chest. Her palm was cold, armored plates brushing against his skin. She withdrew and said one word, her accent heavy, but clear enough to pierce the silence. "Male." The whisper spread like fire. Warriors echoed it around the chamber, voices rising in shock, in recognition, or perhaps disbelief. Reeves's gut tightened. He realized the truth then. These beings had no men among them. Entire legions, fleets, a whole species of warriors, and not a single male until now. His fists clenched. "What the hell does that mean to you?" But they ignored his outburst. The leader barked an order, and suddenly two warriors grabbed him again. He was forced onto a cold metallic slab in the center of the chamber. Strange restraints snaked out, binding his wrists and ankles. A humming device flickered to life above him, casting his body in shifting beams of light. Reeves thrashed, teeth bared. "If this is an interrogation, you're wasting your time." "I'll tell you nothing." The leader tilted her head. Her lips curled into the faintest suggestion of a smirk. She replied, not in her own tongue this time, but in halting, broken English. "Not questions. Study." The device projected a hologram of his body, rotating it in glowing detail. The warriors leaned closer, murmuring, pointing at organs, bones, blood vessels. Some looked disturbed, others fascinated. One even removed her gauntlet and pressed her bare hand against his arm, recoiling when she felt the warmth of living flesh. Reeves's anger hardened into something colder. He had faced enemies who wanted him dead, but these women didn't want to kill him. They wanted to understand him. He wasn't a prisoner of war. He was an artifact. The ship suddenly lurched, throwing several warriors off balance. Sirens wailed in tones deeper and sharper than any human alarm. The walls glowed crimson. Outside, faint tremors of explosions shook the chamber. The leader barked a string of orders. The warriors sprang into motion, arming themselves, blades and rifles flashing to life. Two remained by Reeves, keeping him restrained. Through the shaking hull, a distant roar echoed. The insectoid swarm had found them. Reeves twisted against his bonds, heart racing. If the ship fell while he was strapped down, he'd die without even a fight. He shouted at the nearest warrior, voice laced with defiance. "Untie me! You want a warrior? I'll fight. Otherwise, we're all dead!" The leader hesitated at the chamber's entrance, staring back at him with those burning golden eyes. The silence stretched, broken only by the ship's groans. Finally, with a sharp gesture, she commanded, "Release him." The bonds snapped open. Reeves sat up, grabbing the nearest weapon from the rack. It was heavier than any human rifle, its surface alive with shifting light, but it fit in his grip like it was waiting for him. He looked at the leader, blood still trickling down his temple from earlier battles. "Good choice," he growled. The ship shook again, harder this time. Outside, the war was coming. And for the first time, Reeves and the warrior women would fight side by side. The deck vibrated under Reeves's boots as the silver warship climbed back into orbit. From the viewport, he saw the swarm waiting, an endless storm of insectoid vessels circling like carrion over a carcass. They weren't letting their new prey escape. The warriors rushed to their stations, movements swift and trained. Their armor hissed as it sealed tight, helmets folding back over sharp features. The air filled with the hum of strange engines and the metallic clang of weapons systems coming online. Reeves had no idea how to read their controls, but war was a language he understood in every form. He gripped the alien rifle he had taken earlier. Its surface pulsed with faint blue light, vibrating with hidden energy. The leader, Saraya, though he didn't yet know her name, watched him from across the command deck. Her eyes burned with both suspicion and curiosity, as if she was weighing whether to trust him or discard him like a broken blade. The ship lurched violently as the first wave struck. Explosions rippled across the hull, making the chamber lights flicker. The insectoid ships had begun their assault, bombarding the silver vessel from every angle. Reeves braced himself against the wall, scanning the consoles. The warriors were fighting with precision, but he saw flaws instantly. Their firing arcs overlapped too often. Their movements were too rigid. They were warriors. Yes, but warriors trained to fight in perfect formation, not adapt on the fly. Against the chaotic insectoid swarm, that discipline would cost them everything. "Your firing lines are collapsing," Reeves shouted over the din. "You're leaving gaps in the flank. They'll breach in minutes." The warriors didn't understand him, at least not his words, but Saraya did. Her gaze narrowed. For a tense heartbeat, she hesitated. Then she gestured sharply, and the warriors adjusted positions. Reeves saw the difference immediately. Open corridors closed, overlapping fire reduced, the chaos slowed. A grin touched his lips. "That's better." The swarm retaliated with fury. Organic missiles slammed into the shields, splattering acid that hissed against the hull. A smaller drone vessel rammed directly into their flank, piercing the outer plating. The ship screamed like a wounded animal. A squad of warriors rushed past Reeves to seal the breach. Instinct drove him after them. They reached a hangar chamber where the bulkhead had buckled. Dozens of insectoid drones scuttled inside, claws slicing through metal as they poured toward the inner decks. Reeves raised his alien rifle, squeezed the trigger, and nearly staggered from the recoil. A bolt of condensed light erupted, vaporizing 2 drones instantly. He adjusted, firing again, carving through their ranks. The warriors fought alongside him, blades humming as they sliced through chitin. Their teamwork was flawless, every strike complementing another. But Reeves fought differently, messy, improvised, unpredictable. He kicked a drone into a wall, then blasted its skull before it hit the floor. When a warrior stumbled, he dragged her clear, firing point blank into the creatures swarming her. One of them barked a sharp phrase, staring at him with a mix of shock and grudging respect. Reeves didn't need translation. He knew the look. Acknowledgement. By the time the last drone screeched and fell, the deck was slick with ichor. Reeves wiped his brow, chest heaving. The warriors reformed into their formation, blades gleaming, but their eyes lingered on him. Not prey now. Something else. The ship groaned again, engines straining. They hurried back to the command deck. The swarm was tightening its net, more hive ships arriving by the minute. Their silver vessel was surrounded. Reeves studied the glowing map projected above the central console. His soldier's mind worked quickly. He spotted a weakness, one narrow path through the swarm where the enemy had overcommitted to flanking maneuvers. A suicidal gamble, but the only chance. He pointed, forcing his voice steady. There, break through here. Push everything you've got into that line or you'll be buried. The warriors frowned, murmuring in confusion. The leader turned to him, her expression unreadable. Silence stretched, broken only by the distant thunder of weapons fire. Finally, she slammed her fist against the console, barking the order in her tongue. The crew moved instantly, weapons recalibrating, engines flaring to maximum. The ship plunged forward, cannons roaring. Bolts of light tore into the swarm, ripping a bloody corridor through the enemy line. The vessel shuddered violently under counterfire, but Reeves kept shouting corrections. Left flank, divert fire, cut them off before they regroup. Against all odds, the plan worked. The silver ship burst through the swarm, engines screaming, leaving a trail of burning husks in its wake. When the last enemy vessel slipped from view, the command deck fell into silence. Warriors stared at Reeves, breathing hard, their eyes wide. Some still looked wary, others stunned, but not one of them dismissed him anymore. Soraya approached, her armor scorched, her braid loose. She studied him for a long moment, golden eyes narrowing. Finally, in halting English, she said, "Human fights." Reeves smirked, despite the ache in his bones. "You're damn right I do." For the first time since the battle began, Soraya's lips curved, just slightly. Not a smile, not yet, but a spark of respect. The uneasy alliance had been forged in fire. And though neither side trusted the other fully, Reeves knew one thing with certainty. Humanity was no longer alone in this war. The jump tore across space like a blade through cloth. One moment Reeves stood among smoke and static alarms. The next he was staring out of the viewport at a world unlike anything he had ever seen. Kael'thera. The planet was immense, wrapped in storm clouds that glowed with streaks of violet lightning. Mountain ranges rose like jagged teeth, their peaks carved into colossal fortresses. Towers of silver and obsidian stretched so high they pierced the clouds, glowing rivers of molten energy running down their sides like veins of fire. War banners, larger than any human building, rippled in the storms. The silver warship descended through the clouds, cutting through turbulence with unnatural stability. Reeves pressed his hand against the glass. Everywhere below he saw movement, formations of armored women marching in endless rows, drilling with perfect precision, their chants shaking the earth itself. No civilians, no children, no softness. This was not a world of balance. It was a forge built for war. The vessel touched down on a landing platform etched with runes. Reeves was escorted out, flanked by warriors on all sides. Their blades glowed faintly even at rest, as if reminding him what they could do if he stepped out of line. He kept his chin high, refusing to show weakness. They led him through towering gates into a chamber that dwarfed any human council hall. A vaulted ceiling arched so high it disappeared into shadow, lit only by streams of molten light flowing in crystalline channels across the floor. The walls were carved with murals, battles etched into stone, endless victories, legions of women locked in eternal combat. At the center stood the High Council. A ring of armored giants waited, each more imposing than the last. Their armor was older, more elaborate than Soraya's, inscribed with symbols of rank and centuries of campaigns. Their gazes struck Reeves like spears, cold, assessing, suspicious. Soraya stepped forward, presenting him with a warrior's salute. Her words in their tongue rang clear, sharp as steel. Reeves couldn't understand, but he didn't need to. Every gesture, every look told him the story. She was declaring what they had found. The council stirred. Gasps echoed through the hall. Some leaned forward in fascination, eyes narrowing at Reeves as if he were a miracle. Others recoiled, fists clenching, voices rising in angry protest, the word repeated again and again in their harsh language. Reeves caught it despite the barrier. Male, two warriors argued furiously. One slammed her spear into the ground, sparks scattering, demanding his execution. Another gestured toward the ancient carvings along the wall, pointing to a faded symbol that vaguely resembled a man's silhouette. Prophecy. Myth. Reeves stood in the center of it all, unarmed but unbowed. He could feel the weight of their judgment pressing on him. He wasn't supposed to be here. To them, he was either an omen or a curse. Finally, the chamber fell into silence. The eldest counselor rose. Her armor was etched with more scars than Reeves could count. She looked at him as if he were a riddle she'd waited her whole life to solve. Then, in broken English, she asked, "You are human?" Reeves's jaw tightened. "Damn right I am," murmurs rippled again. The word human hissed across the hall like fire in dry grass. The elder tilted her head. "Why, you fight swarm? You—" "Weak. Fragile." Reeves barked a laugh, bitter and sharp. "Weak? You think being breakable makes us weak? That's why we fight, because we know we can die. And we fight anyway." His voice rose, echoing against the molten walls. "You see scars? Each one is a battle I wasn't supposed to survive. But I did. My people did. And we'll keep fighting until there's nothing left. Because no swarm, no empire, no prophecy gets to decide if humanity lives or dies. We do." The council chamber shook with the force of his defiance. The warriors stared at him in silence, some wide-eyed, others seething. For the first time, the order, the certainty of Kael'thera cracked. Soraya stepped forward, her golden eyes fixed on Reeves. She said something sharp in her tongue, her tone commanding. Though he couldn't translate, Reeves understood the message. She was backing him. The eldest counselor finally raised a hand, silencing the uproar. Her gaze swept over the chamber, then returned to Reeves. Slowly, deliberately, she nodded. "Human, fight with us. Or die." The decree rang out like thunder. Reeves didn't hesitate. "Then I'll fight," the council roared, some in approval, others in fury. But it no longer mattered. Reeves had carved his place here, not with prophecy, not with weakness, but with defiance. For the first time, the warriors of Kael'thara looked at him not as a specimen, not as prey, but as an equal. The alliance did not begin with trust. It began with necessity. Within days of the Council's decision, human fleet remnants and Kael'theran warships gathered at a staging ground in the Rift Point Nebula. Asteroids drifted like tombstones, their surfaces scarred from ancient battles. The airwaves were filled with uneasy silence between commanders, translators straining to keep up with the constant flood of orders. Reeves stood on the deck of a Kael'theran carrier, armored now in silver plates gifted to him. It was lighter than human gear, flexible but strong, glowing faintly along the seams. The alien rifle still rested across his back, humming like a living beast. Beside him, Soraya watched the tactical display, her jaw set, her eyes burning. The swarm came in waves. Hive ships emerged from the dark like predators scenting blood, their chitinous hulls cracking open to spill legions of drone vessels. The nebula lit up as the first shots were fired. Human destroyers darted through asteroid fields, laying traps of mines and torpedoes. Theron cruisers followed, unleashing spears of energy that tore through enemy ranks. The void became fire. Reeves's voice rang through comms as he directed human ships to exploit weaknesses. He had studied the swarm long enough to know their patterns, how they folded inward too quickly, how they pressed too hard when they thought victory certain. He turned that aggression against them, luring them into kill zones. Still, the cost was brutal. Every victory was bought with wreckage. Reeves watched a human frigate vanish in a spray of acid fire, its escape pods incinerated before they could launch. Theron warriors howled over the loss of one of their capital ships, its glowing engines torn apart by a hive carrier that split it in two. On the ground, the war was worse. The swarm had landed brood ships on the surface of a barren moon in the system. If the hives spread there, they would infect the entire nebula within weeks. Reeves and Soraya led a joint strike team to cut out the infestation at its root. The drop pods slammed into the gray soil, opening into hell. Rivers of acid wound across the landscape. Towers of bone rose from the ground, each one pulsing with sickly light. Drones poured from the hive spires in endless streams, screeching as they charged. Reeves hit the ground running, rifle blazing. Every bolt tore through insectoid flesh, painting the dirt in ichor. Beside him, Soraya's blade sang arcs of silver light, each swing carving through multiple enemies. Her warriors followed in perfect rhythm, their movements like a storm of steel. But this wasn't enough. The swarm adapted quickly. Drones began leaping in coordinated waves, overwhelming the line. Reeves found himself dragged down by 3 at once, their claws tearing at his armor. He drove a knife into one's skull, fired point-blank into another's chest, but the third clamped its jaws onto his shoulder, teeth grinding against his plates. Then Soraya's roar split the battlefield. She slammed into the creatures, ripping them off him with bare hands. Her blade flashed, decapitating one, cleaving the others in half. She yanked Reeves to his feet, her armor slick with alien blood. "Fragile," she snarled, voice strained. "But unbroken." Reeves spat blood, wiping it from his chin. "That's humanity for you." They pressed on, leading the charge through swarms that seemed endless. Explosions ripped apart hive towers as human artillery rained down from orbit. Still the creatures fought, their screams echoing across the wasteland. By the time they reached the Brood Queen's chamber, half their strike force was dead. The air inside was suffocating, thick with heat and the reek of decay. Walls pulsed as though alive, dripping with slime. At the center rose the Queen's cocoon, a grotesque throne from which she directed the battle. Reeves raised his weapon. "End her, and we break the swarm's grip!" the Queen shrieked, splitting her cocoon. She towered over them, wings unfurling, her claws dripping venom. The ground shook as she lunged, scattering warriors like toys. Reeves rolled aside, firing shot after shot into her carapace. Soraya vaulted forward, her blade biting deep, sparks flying as it struck bone. The fight was savage. Warriors died by the dozen, crushed beneath her claws. Reeves emptied his rifle, switched to grenades, then to his knife when ammunition ran out. Every strike barely slowed her. Acid sprayed across the chamber, sizzling against armor, burning through flesh. At one point, Reeves went down hard, pinned beneath the Queen's talon. The pressure crushed his chest, ribs creaking. The stench of her venom filled his lungs. He thought it was the end, until Soraya leapt, driving her blade straight through the Queen's throat. The beast howled, thrashing violently. Reeves shoved with everything he had, rolling free as Soraya tore her weapon sideways, ripping open a gash. The Queen collapsed, twitching, her blood flooding the chamber in a river of acid. The hive spire shuddered, cracks racing up its walls as if the planet itself was dying. Reeves staggered to his feet, chest heaving. Soraya limped beside him, her armor smoking from burns. Around them, the few survivors still standing raised their blades, their voices ringing in a victorious war cry. The Queen was dead. But Reeves knew it wasn't over. This hive was only one of many. Beyond the nebula, beyond the stars, more queens waited. More fleets stirred. The war of fire had only just begun, and humanity was right in the center of it. The queen's death shattered the hive on the barren moon, but Reeves and Soraya knew it was only a spark in a storm. Within weeks, human intelligence reported the swarm converging, a vast armada of hive ships, more enormous than anything seen before. Not one queen, but many. The enemy had sensed the threat of unity between humans and Kael'thar, and they meant to extinguish it. The battle to decide the future of both species would be fought at the heart of the Rift Point Nebula. The combined fleet stood waiting. Human dreadnoughts lined beside Kael'tharan carriers, their hulls gleaming in eerie nebula light. New weapons had been forged in secret workshops. Hybrid designs mixing human gunpowder brutality with alien energy refinement. Crews barely had time to test them, but there was no choice. This was survival or extinction. Reeves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, Earth's last dreadnought, commanding not only his people but coordinating with Soraya's warriors across the armada. She appeared beside him in a holographic projection, her silver armor battered but repaired, her eyes locked on him with fierce certainty. "Tonight, soldier," she said, "we either forge eternity or vanish." The swarm arrived like a nightmare. Hive ships tore from hyperspace, blotting out the stars. Their size dwarfed even the largest human vessels, and their escorts swarmed like hornets around them. The comms lit up with panic, with fear, with desperate voices calling for guidance. Reeves didn't flinch. "Hold the line. Burn them before they burn us." And the void erupted. The Resolute's main cannons thundered, unleashing volleys that lit the nebula like a supernova. Kael'tharan carriers formed phalanxes, their shields glowing white-hot as wave after wave of drones crashed against them. Human strikecraft weaved through the chaos, laying down minefields and kamikaze runs that tore chunks from hive ships. Every second was slaughter. Whole wings of fighters vanished in acid storms. Human destroyers cracked apart, spilling crew into the void. Kael'tharan war cruisers were ripped open, their warriors fighting to the last even as their hulls burned. But the swarm bled too. Hybrid weapons seared through hive armor, tearing open massive holes that exposed their grotesque interiors. Kael'tharan boarding parties stormed into the wounds, blades singing in zero gravity, hacking through insect flesh with unyielding fury. Reeves's strategy turned the chaos into choke points, forcing the swarm to funnel into killing fields where massed fire shredded them. Still, it wasn't enough. In the midst of the carnage, the swarm unleashed their trump card, a titan, a living leviathan of biomatter, its size dwarfing any ship in either fleet. It moved like a planet set aflame, its tentacles whipping out to smash vessels into wreckage. One swipe took 3 Kael'tharan cruisers. Another tore half the Resolute's escorts apart. The comms exploded in despair. "It's unstoppable." Reeves's hands shook, but his voice didn't. "Not unstoppable, just unbroken. Soraya, get your warriors to its core. I'll give you an opening." The Titan bore down on the Resolute, jaws opening to unleash a storm of plasma. Reeves gave the order. Every weapon forward, every missile, every railgun. The dreadnought shuddered, metal groaning, lights flickering as its heart was poured into one strike. The blast tore a wound straight through the Titan's carapace, exposing a pulsing heart of fire. Soraya's warship speared into the wound. She and her elite boarded the beast directly, carving their way through screaming corridors of living tissue, cutting down guardians as thick as tanks. Blood and acid rained on them, but they pressed forward, blades never slowing. Reeves guided the Resolute closer, every alarm screaming. Fire consumed his ship's decks, but he stood tall, directing every cannon, every torpedo into the Titan's body. The dreadnought was dying, but he refused to let it fall without one last blow. "Earth still stands," he growled through bloodied teeth. "As long as I breathe, Earth still stands." Inside the Titan, Soraya reached the core chamber. A living furnace, beating like a star. Her blade flared as she plunged it deep, screaming a war cry that shook the beast from within. The Titan writhed, its death throes tearing the battlefield apart. Swarm ships faltered, their coordination collapsing as their god beast burned. Reeves gave the final order. "All ships, push! Now!" The armada surged forward. Humans and Kael'thar together drowned the swarm in fire. Hive ships split, drones scattered, and the nebula itself seemed to ignite as wreckage burned in every direction. But the Resolute was breaking. Systems failed one by one, flames consuming its heart. Reeves stood at the command chair, smoke filling his lungs, alarms blaring in his ears. He knew the ship would not survive. Soraya's voice crackled through comms, faint but fierce. "The Titan is dead. The swarm flees. We endure." Reeves closed his eyes, a tired smile cutting through the blood on his face. "Then humanity endures too." The Resolute exploded in a final blaze of light, its last act a detonation that annihilated the retreating swarm vessels. The shockwave echoed through the nebula, a funeral pyre and a victory in one. When silence finally fell, only wreckage remained. The swarm was broken. The survivors, human and Kael'thar alike, lifted their voices in triumph, though grief choked their throats. Reeves was gone, but his name burned into them like a star. He had not died a victim. He had died proving that humanity, fragile and unyielding, could fight gods and live to tell the tale. Soraya stood aboard her flagship, blade raised, voice fierce. "Let every world know this. Humanity is small, but unbreakable." Reeves showed us. "We fight together now, not as alien and human, but as warriors. This is the age of fire, and it is ours. The war wasn't over." More queens waited in the dark. More battles would come. But for the first time, the galaxy had seen it. Humanity's fury, humanity's resilience, and the swarm had learned to fear it.